Today's episode of Life's Potluck Buffet is about string theory. No, string theories, and nothing. It has nothing to do with physics, so that's a topic for another time. But it has to do with some really old systems that involve strings. And I'll talk about those today and ask the cards to use their system of communication to tell us something about our work and lives. That's going to help us out today. So stick around for episode 307 of Life's Potluck Buffet, only on YouTube. This is John Paulus, host of Life's Potluck Buffet. If you're enjoying the episodes of the show, please subscribe. And if you've already subscribed, thank you for your support. And if you use the Brave browser like I do, you can contribute basic attention tokens to Life's Potluck Buffet with John Paulus on YouTube through your Brave browser. Thank you again for your support, and thank you for listening. Have you ever heard of quipus? Does the word quipu sound familiar? Well, that's what today's episode is about. Or at least that's where I'm going to start today's episode. What is a quipu, and what's the significance of this, and what does it have to do with strings? Well, I'll tell you. We have to take a little trip, just mentally. We don't need to go anywhere physically. Yesterday's episode was all about St. Helena Island and Jonathan and Saints. And if you haven't seen it, just check it out. It's on the playlist. But we need to travel several thousand miles west and a bit north to get to the Andes of what is now called South America and what are now called the Andes, the mountain range of the western part of South America. And in those Andes, a language family arose known as Quechua. And this was the language family that had spread so widely by the time the very large, what we call Inca Empire, existed. Tawantinsuyu, as it was called by the people of the time. And so Quechua languages had spread so much that the language of the Inca Empire was a Quechua language. And today in Quechua, because there are 7.2 million speakers, first language speakers of Quechua today. So I don't want you to think that this is some sort of ancient language that went away. It didn't go away. It obviously evolved. And so the word Inca today in Quechua means something like lord or ruler of that sort. In more ancient Quechua, it apparently meant, I gather, something like elite, because the nobility were also Inca, not just the rulers of, not just the single like king or ruler in that sense, but the ruling elite. I think Inca, sounds like that might be a good kind of translation of it. So the ruling elite, and that's what Inca probably meant back then. And Quechua language was the language of that imperial sphere. Now, there are also languages that are not related to the Quechua language family that existed in what is now the Andes in South America. And that's going to be important, too, for today's episode, because there's a culture that existed before the Inca Empire, and that is the Chimu or Chimur culture. And that is they spoke a couple of languages apparently in their imperial realm that they had before the Inca took over. And those languages are Mochica and Kingnam. Mochica and Kingnam are both not related to Quechua. They're loanwords. We know a little bit of Kingnam, and we know that there are loanwords that are from Quechua, but it doesn't necessarily seem like all of the stuff is Quechua, so that's probably not a Quechua language. Same thing, Mochica is seemingly a language isolate, like Basque or Etruscan. Remember, we were talking about these languages that were, Basque is a great example. That doesn't, there's no known relatives of Basque, and it existed there in what is northern Spain, southern France, long before any Indo-European languages arrived there with the settlers who were speaking Indo-European languages. And the big center for the Chimu was a place that is now it was called Chanchan, but in modern times it is the Peruvian city, or well, near the Peruvian city Trujillo, and that is an important site and a very cool archaeological site in Peru, as there are many. And the something that was discovered from the Chimu culture is in storage somewhere in Maryland, in the United States, in the state of Maryland. And it's in the storage unit of one of the many storage units of the Smithsonian Institute, the big federal government museum in the United States. And this is where strings begin to come in, because somewhere before the Inca, the Chimu may have created a communications device in string, although given the prevalence of string recording systems, now Kipu, it means not in Quechua, and that's what we're going to talk about Kipu in a second, but there's a unknown, well, its use is not known, string thing in storage in Maryland, the United States, and it is from the Chimu culture, and people think that it may be the tin can telephones that you make when you're a kid, where you string a piece of twine between two tin cans and you can hear what your friend is saying when they talk into the tin can, and you stretch it out so it's taut, and the vibrations of your voice, the sound, the pressure of the sound waves creates these vibrations that then, send your message and your voice through the string to the other can, which acts as a amplifier a little bit, and then you can, and through the resonance, you can hear what a person is saying. There are some people who believe, there's only really one article that has been written about this. There's not a lot of research that has been done on this, and it's two gourds that have been covered with resin and have animal hide membranes at the bottom. And there's a 75-foot cotton twine string between them. And so there have been a lot of string theories, about how that device was basically an ancient version of a telephone for, I guess, 75-foot communications. Now, whether this works or not, it hasn't been tried out. To my knowledge, and I've looked into it a lot, they certainly haven't tried to use the actual device, and I don't know of anybody who's built a device that is exactly similar that they can test it to see if 75 feet would work for this. But this is the thought, and it plays into a kind of outlook on the culture of Chimu regarding elites. I guess what the Inca would have called Inca later on. But the idea is that they didn't want to have contact with certain others, like, it was this kind of thing. But that there's some sort of hierarchy where, like, they had to use this communications device to talk to underlings and so forth. But this is all speculation by people who have speculated quite wildly about this. However, it's out there. And strings and communications are a thing in that period, and even earlier in the Andean cultures in South America, because those cultures used strings to record numbers and maybe even languages, although no string language has been deciphered yet. Although there's a person at the University of St. Andrews in Scotland that believes that they have deciphered the string, not a knot language. And when I say knot, I mean KNOT, because that's what Kipu are. They're knots. And they're this very complex but well-known system of record keeping in the cultures of the Andes forever, including today, because they're still used today for official purposes in those cultures. And these strings, knotted strings, which are also dyed various colors, and the full meaning of that seems to be also unknown. What exactly the colors translate to, if they translate to something that has to do with language, or if they translate to something that has to do with numbers. But the reason that we know that they use these knots to keep records of numbers, like censuses and all sorts of things like that, is because and tax records and payments and just all sorts of records that we keep in Hindu Arabic numerals. It's absolutely clear that these numbers these knots, various types and position, are representing numbers in a lot of the quipu that we still have today, because the certain strings are actually sums of the previous strings, and you can check them against those sums. So that's really cool, because there's like strings that are interspersed that often represent the sum of a number of strings before, and you can actually check your math. So that makes it pretty darn clear that there was a lot of summing going on in these, and that these are numerals. There are people who believe, as I said, the person who is a professor at St. Andrews in Scotland, there are people who think that there are some of these quipus are actual language, that they are a undeciphered, or in this case of the person claiming decipherment, a deciphered language of the groups in that time period. There is also a third theory about these strings, that they're kind of like musical notation, that they're actually communicating something in the same way, how notes in sheet music communicate sounds. They may be communicating something beyond just numbers, that certain ones may be actually used to communicate patterns that could then be repeated and have to do with language or some other sign system that communicates something different from what the numbers communicate. So that's the quipu. Let's ask the cards about what their system of words and numbers has to say to us today. So, yellow lemons, blue dumplings, magenta noodles. Cards, tell us some things. Okay. Oh, this one looks like the one. Here it is. Find your people. It's card number 43. So 43 is the important number here. And what it's communicating to us is to find your people. Knowing who to work with and who to work for informs what you need to work on and where. Find people with whom you resonate. Oh, that's kind of a reference to our possible 1,200-year-old telephone. And can truly work collaboratively. Speak with trusted people connected to your work communities too, and see where that leads you. And for now, try to think of a moment, whatever popped into your head, about a time when you felt like you resonated with a group of people in a work context. And give that a thought, what that means for you and your work and your life going forward. Thanks for listening today, and I will see you tomorrow on Life's Potluck Buffet.